Welcome to the Early Edge NFL Player Prop Show, brought to you by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever and whenever you are listening. Quite the show to be on. It is the divisional round. It's arguably the most exciting weekend of the NFL season, so let's get rolling. But first, let's recap last week, where Uncle Dave is on a heater right now, 3-1, made us some money. I did not do so well. And by the way, thank you, K-Tay, in the Discord chat, for reminding prop stars that I owed him $100 for Marvin Mims, of which I paid earlier this week. This is why I don't do showdowns against these guys, because usually they're too sharp and they take my money. So that's why I try to avoid that. But let's bring in the stars of the show right now. We have the great prop stars, the best prop bettor that I know and on the planet, as far as I'm concerned, and the Hall of Famer from CBS Sports, the one, the only, Dave Richard. Uncle Dave, you're on kind of a heater right now. Any secrets to your success that you can share with yours truly?
Yeah, when I take an under on a player, I fly out to wherever that player is, and I steal their car before the game, and that's how I make sure that they go under. No, I don't do that. I'm not skilled enough to steal a car. I stick with simple props, and this week especially, I dialed in a lot more. You're going to hear about just how much I reeled back this week. And all of my props are rush attempts, rush yards. That's it. I did not get into anything exotic. I did not get into anything crazy. I think this is the time of the year where teams are getting conservative. I think it's smart that if you're going to be a player prop bettor, you should be conservative as well.
Proppy, your philosophy, and you've talked about this throughout the year and long beforehand. You start out for earlier in the season, the lines aren't as sharp, you'll bet more. And as the season goes along, you bet less and less. When you get to the divisional round, there's only 4 games. What happens to your betting volume?
Yeah, it significantly decreases. At this stage of the season, I may have maybe 2 to 3 positions as far as bets that I'll have as far as props are concerned in the NFL. These lines are very sharp. Each of these games are under the microscope. The odds makers are very adept and competent. They have a lot of data at this stage of the season to pull from. So, yeah, I would offer that these lines are very sharp. I think also, as we see, a lot of these inefficiencies are when the lines will open often as well. The market will oftentimes correct itself the longer a prop is available or on the market. But one anecdote I wanted to tell you guys was I really wanted to bet Ladd McConkey. I thought Dave made a tremendous case. I talked about how much I like the prop. I go to my sports book, and when it's within 30 minutes of kickoff, all of the kiosks and the sports books are just totally jammed up. It's really hard to bet. So I waited in line, which I hate doing, but I waited in line for a kiosk. Finally, it opens. The game had just kicked off, so I missed the bet. And then I tried to get a live bet in on McConkey, who got off to a great start. And I still wanted to hammer that line. I was going to take an alt line, but there were multiple people behind me, and the line just kept coming up and coming off, and it was just very hard to place that wager. So I was never able to bet Ladd McConkey, but I wanted to tip the hat to Dave. That was an excellent call, and what a game Ladd McConkey had.
What's the moral of that story, Proppy?
Get your bets in early.
Exactly right. And that's why, once again, if you are a SportsLine subscriber, which I assume most of you listening and watching are, and you please make sure to download the SportsLine app and turn on notifications. When we post picks, you want to get the lines as sharp as you can get them. As often, Proppy, you'll put something in regardless of the sport, and the line will move. I mean, Dave got in McConkey at 70 yards last week. He got that on one play in the fourth quarter, but still 180 yards. It's nice when you go over by 110 yards. Go ahead, Proppy.
Yeah, and just to Dave's point there, I would have gotten the worst number that was basically available on the market. So it really pays to be first, to get in early, not just so you can place your wager, just because you'll get a much better number 95% of the time as well. So, yeah, I think that is a great example of why it pays to listen, to subscribe, and have your notifications turned on.
Well, let me ask you a question, Proppy, just as someone who's an experienced prop bettor, and you've been doing it a lot longer than I have. Let's say you get in any prop early. We can use McConkey as an example, and then the line changes and it goes down. Does that make you, assuming there's no news like McConkey's hurt or his quarterback's hurt or the weather's going to be bad or anything like that, does that make you want to double down on the prop? Because now you've already gotten it, let's say at 70, now you can get it at 65. Or do you even consider, if it goes down a lot, trying to hedge it so that you've got a spot where you could get a certain specific number and you can win both bets and you're only risking 10% of one of the wagers? Do you have any type of advice on that type of a situation when you bet early?
So there are examples where I do think it's viable to middle a bet, which is what Dave mentioned. Well, let's say we get an early number. I think it really depends on the category, though. Like rushing attempts, for example, oftentimes you'll see a really bad line open when the props populate. Let's say it's 15.5 on Derrick Henry, right? And then by kickoff that line's all the way up to 21.5 or something like that. A rare circumstance, but that does happen fairly frequently. In that situation where it's a significant difference, it makes sense in my opinion to potentially middle. Outside of those kind of really rare circumstances, I don't. And then to answer your main question, Dave, regarding what I do if the line moves in the opposite direction or away from me, that's a rare circumstance as well. I feel if there's, not like some news pertaining to an injury or something like that. But in the rare event that does happen, I'll usually continue to add to my position as the week or the days leading up to kickoff. So, yeah, that just gives me a better chance to get more down on the prop usually. So that's actually a situation I kind of wish would happen more often than it does.
Before we get going here, I want to thank Matt in the chat, our guy Matt, who always says he has his notifications on for all early edge shows, and that's how he was reminded that this show was on. Make sure to do that. Make sure to like this show, which helps us out as well. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this show different than we've done any of the other 19 before them. We're going to go game by game, and we're just going to do all the props for a particular game instead of doing it by position. So let us start with Saturday afternoon, Texans at Chiefs. Uncle Dave, you have the first prop. Let's talk about Patrick Mahomes. Now, when Patrick Mahomes, last time I checked, is a quarterback, but you're going to play it differently.
Patrick Mahomes is a quarterback who likes to use his legs in the playoffs, and so I'm going to take the over on his rushing yards. It's only 23.5 at minus 115, and this is the time of year. We've seen it again and again where Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs will use his legs a little bit more, literally half of the 18 playoff games. Think about that. He's played 18 playoff games. That's unreal. He's been over 30 yards. He's been over this line, and we've seen him run during the season, including against these Texans in week 16. I mentioned 30 yards. That's coming up in a second. Houston has allowed, EC, a league most 8.1 yards per rush to quarterbacks when you exclude kneel downs from the average. The kneel downs obviously bring an average down because every time a quarterback takes a kneel down, they lose a yard. I'm not expecting Patrick Mahomes to do much of that until the very end of the game, if he's even the one on the field taking those kneel downs. I'm looking more at that number that's more true, and that's just what a quarterback gets when he does take off and run. The 30 yards, here it is. 7 quarterbacks have had at least that many yards against the Texans on the ground this season. And remember this, gentlemen, the Chiefs' run game is far from a sure thing right now. So more is going to be on Patrick Mahomes' plate to make things happen. And I started thinking about this player prop last week when I was out for dinner with my wife, and some people like to go to the ballet with their wife, or some of them like to go to fancy nightclubs. My wife and I, we go somewhere where we can get a nice dinner and watch the game. She's a football nut, just like me. And when I saw Justin Herbert getting attacked by that Texans offensive line, my first thought wasn't, oh no, this is bad for Mahomes. It was, this is going to be a situation where Patrick Mahomes is going to have to move. And when he starts moving, he starts rushing. And that's where these rushing yards comes into play. This is my favorite prop of the week. Patrick Mahomes over 23.5 rush yards at minus 115.
Proppy.
Yeah, I like this quite a bit for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, I don't have the data in front of me, but I believe the Texans play man at a fairly high rate as well, which lends itself to quarterbacks moving. Second, and more important, or not more importantly, but I weigh more importantly, I wish I could credit who wrote this, but I read an article recently regarding a correlation between quarterbacks rushing in prime time or playoff games. Like when the stakes are higher, quarterbacks tend to run more, especially ones like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. So I do believe that come the playoffs, you're going to see Patrick Mahomes taking a risk that he wouldn't necessarily take in the regular season. So, yeah, I like this quite a bit. I think we're seeing that across the board, quarterbacks with Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson as well. But, yeah, I think we've seen Mahomes, frankly, just rush more in the postseason compared to the regular season.
Remind me to do that study when the football season's over, Prop, so I can give you the numbers on how quarterbacks do in prime time and whether or not they run more. I wonder if some of it has to do with the quarterbacks that are on prime time are the more exciting quarterbacks around the league. And those are the guys in this era that like to run a lot. I don't remember Dan Marino running a lot in prime time, for example, way back in the day. As for Houston playing man, they're not a man-heavy team. Remember, I get this data every single week. I update it every single week. They've been playing about 66% zone, so about 2/3 of their snaps over their last 5 games. That was weighted by their loss against Kansas City in week 16 when they played 56% zone. So you were on the right track, Proper Rooney. This is a team that went to man-to-man coverage more often than they normally do when they played Kansas City earlier this year. I would expect them to try the exact same thing. Ergo, opportunities for Mahomes to take off against man coverage.
Hey, Dave, Andrew asks in the chat, how do you feel about his over under 4.5 rushing attempts?
I probably should have looked at that a little bit harder. But remember, when it comes to rush attempts, that does include kneel downs. And since there's an opportunity for him to maybe get 1 kneel down in the game, you're only looking for him to get 4 runs in the game. I would lean over on that as long as the juice wasn't too bad.
It's also not, it's also entirely possible to get a kneel down in the first half as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be if the kneel down happens. Absolutely.
All right, Proppy, for the next prop, Travis Kelce. Now, you have a Kelce prop, but I have to say this before we get going. Travis Kelce in recent years has been excellent in the playoffs as compared to the regular season. He has upped his game. In making this prop, do you factor in any other postseason performances?
Yes, to a certain extent. I think at this stage of Travis Kelce's career, he plays the play in the postseason. It's similar to what we saw with Rob Gronkowski and Tom Brady. Travis Kelce, the greatest pass-catching tight end in NFL history. We're getting him at 52.5 receiving yards. I think that's at least 10 to 12 yards too low, considering the resume, how good Travis Kelce is, the rapport with Patrick Mahomes, and this matchup, frankly. I think the Chiefs' offense finally having viable wide receivers, DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, and then Houston having excellent outside corners as well. I think this lends itself to Travis Kelce working as that safety valve for Patrick Mahomes. I also think Houston can push Kansas City a bit as well. And then just looking at the playoff numbers for Travis Kelce, he's eclipsed this in 13 consecutive playoff games. He's had 1,900 receiving yards over 21 playoff games. That's averaging 91 yards per game, 19 receiving touchdowns in the playoffs. The guy has been just out of this world. These are like elite wide receiver 1 numbers for a tight end. So I really believe you limit Travis Kelce in the regular season. This is something the team talked about at length. Both Kelce, Mahomes, Andy Reid was not overexposing him in the regular season and not, hoping that he would be healthy, which he is for these moments. So I anticipate Travis Kelce being the focal point of the game plan. And I think, again, this should be 62.5 to 63.5 yards. Last season, it looked to me like Travis Kelce had lost a step until the playoffs. So, until I see him in the playoff games slow down substantially, this to me is like a set it and forget it. I'm going to take this all day.
I think it's a great prop, and that's my favorite prop of yours. Well, actually, no, it's not because I share one with you, but we'll get to that one later in the show. Uncle Dave, you and I actually share a prop or so. Let's start with Joe Mixon, and I'm going to let you give your pick first, and I'll give my pick second. Which way are you leaning on Joe Mixon in this game?
Yeah, I want to find an angle where I can go against Joe Mixon. And so I decided to take a chance on the under on his rush attempts, the number 15.5. And I got it at even money. I don't mind taking this at minus 105, maybe even all the way up to minus 110. But let's just make sure the number's 15.5 or 16.5, 17.5 if you can find it. Spoiler, you won't, but the juice is going to be pretty low. Let's keep it that way. His rush attempt results are a mixed bag, but I can tell you that in the 4 games Houston has lost by 4 or more points, Mixon's had 14 or fewer attempts 3 times. One of those games was against Kansas City back in week 16. But the greater trend, and this is just one that I'm actually like a little proud of finding this one. You tell me if this resonates with you or not. It dates back to 2023. That's when Bobby Slowick came in as the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. And in 15 losses with Slowick calling plays, a running back, any running back for this Texans offense had 16 or more carries 4 times. So 11 out of 15 times, Texans lose the game. We all expect them to lose against Kansas City. The running back didn't get highly involved. And by the way, all those losses, they were 1-score losses. We all know the Chiefs are favored to win by 9+. So if it's a blowout, it's even more likely that Joe Mixon just isn't going to get the type of work that we saw, for example, last week when they won the game against the Chargers. Just 3 running backs have had at least 16 attempts against the Chiefs this season. None have had 17 or more attempts against the Chiefs this season. And one of those 3 games, happened in week 18 when the Chiefs rested their starters. The Chiefs have gotten healthy. Chris Jones is going to be back on that defensive line. The linebackers have been playing great leading up to this week. I was going to say week 18. A lot of the linebackers didn't play in week 18 because they were resting guys. And here's the last thing. Mixon missed practice on Friday. He's got an ankle injury. He's expected to play. If he's not active, you can't win on this bet. But if he's active, there's always the chance that he hurts his ankle, that he's not 100%, that he's not right, and the team pulls him from the game. This is one of those unders that I feel good about, even though the number just feels a little bit low, but it's just a bet on game script going Kansas City's way, and that the Texans won't be able to utilize Joe Mixon as much as they would when they win games.
And that's why I'm going to combo play that, Dave, with Joe Mixon's under 57.5 rushing yards at minus 110. So he had 57 in week 16, but the game was reasonably close. You mentioned that ankle injury. You may see a reduction in snaps. Maybe we see more Dameon Pierce on Sunday. But he's also under this line in 6 of his last 9. And, oh, by the way, Kansas City has the best run defense in the NFL. So all of these things plus game flow are going against Joe Mixon. And so I am on the under here as well. And let's hope we both hit. I just think Mixon, with between the injury and the matchup and the game flow, it is not a good combination. So I am fading Joe Mixon. I know we don't usually do this on the show, but for each of these games, I just want to ask you for a lean. Chiefs are favored 8.5. The total is 41.5. If you were to put a side in there, Dave, what side would you put?
Chiefs laying the points.
Proppy, what would you throw in there?
Houston.
Really? Why?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the Chiefs unable to cover these large spreads. That's been their MO really for the past 4 or 5 seasons. The Chiefs win, but they don't blow out their opponents. They play with their food, or they allow backdoor covers, or whatever the case may be. They just rarely look at their record with spreads at this size. And if you want to see a trend, they have a terrible success rate covering spreads at this size. So until I see them really, put the proverbial foot on the neck, I think I'd have to take the points here with Houston.
To your point, Proppy, there's only 4 games this year they won by 10+ points.
I lean Kansas City. They turn it on for the playoffs, as you guys discussed, but the over actually is my favorite play here. I think
I
they
would
find a
also
way to get
offer
this
that I
over.
was impressed with Houston, the performance last week as well. I thought in comparison to how they looked towards the end of the season, where they really struggled down the stretch, I thought they played well last week. They really don't have a lot to lose here. They're playing with house money. Everyone's counting them out here. So, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me to see this game be competitive.
The problem is that we've seen this movie before. Last year in the playoffs, the Texans, and we talked about this on the Fantasy Football Today podcast. They went up against Cleveland in the first round. A lot of people thought that Joe Flacco who was the quarterback of the Browns last year. They thought that he was just playing too red hot. I thought Cleveland was playing very well. Houston whooped them. And then Houston went to Baltimore, playing with house money, nothing to lose. They got trampled by the Baltimore Ravens in that game. And so I do get a little bit worried, but there is only 2 games this year for the Texans where they've lost by 10 plus.
Baltimore blows out their opponents frequently. Kansas City does not.
Sure. Okay. That's good rationale. I didn't think about that.
I'm gonna ask you this for each one of the games, so it's good discussion to have. But coming up next, we're gonna talk NFC playoff games. Can the Commanders pull the upset in Detroit? And can the Eagles take care of business in a potential snow game at home? We'll find out after we hear from one of our sponsors.
Stay tuned at halftime of the AFC Divisional Playoff game for a sneak peek of 1923 Season 2, streaming February 23rd, exclusively on Paramount+.
And we will talk about Ravens-Bills later in the program, but let's talk Commanders and Lions. This is a fascinating game to me. And Proppy, you and Dave kind of have a combo play here. I'm going to let you start with David Montgomery. What do you like?
Yeah, I'm fired up for this game as well, gentlemen. So looking forward to breaking this one down. But I like Old Faithful David Montgomery here to go over 46.5 rushing yards. David Montgomery off of the injury report, full practice participant, not just the last day or two, all week. So that certainly bodes very well for his role and playing time in this Detroit offense. And it's easy to remember or to think back to the last few weeks where we saw, Jahmyr Gibbs handle all those backfield touches. He's absolutely tremendous. But the Lions are as run heavy as any team in the NFL. They have an exceptional offensive line, and they have not one but 2 excellent running backs. And it's like a thunder and lightning combination here. And they don't want Jahmyr Gibbs to have 22 to 25 touches. In the regular season, David Montgomery averaged 15.8 touches per game. I also really like his rushing attempts line. I have a feeling that Dave might as well. But this just looks like a very good matchup for him and Detroit to run the football. Washington as an opponent are one of the most significant run funnels in the NFL. That's twofold, partly because, as I've talked about, their pass defense has been much improved over the course of the season. Got off to a terrible start, but Washington's pass defense has been very good, and their run defense is extremely weak, extremely vulnerable. In the regular season, 27th in EPA allowed per rush, 24th in success rate. When I talk about EPA too, I don't only want to look at the totality, because the Commanders are a prime example of a team that if you look at their EPA against the pass, it doesn't necessarily reflect how good they are right now. So if we zoom in a bit, we shorten those parameters to week 14 to now, that run defense is 28th in EPA, which is right along or coincides with their season-long statistics as well. So this one just looks very good to me. We're getting a steep discount because he hasn't been in the lineup, but he will be fully utilized in what is a great matchup. Love David Montgomery, all of his props this week.
All right, so Uncle Dave, you and Proppy have some synergy here. Which way you leaning?
I'm taking the over on the rush attempts. Proppy was right that was the way I was going to go. But if you're just a fan of what Prop had to say and what I'm going to say, and you don't want to spend the juice, you take the yardage. But I don't mind ponying up the juice. In fact, you can get over 9.5 rush attempts at some books, but you are going to have to pay at least 135. I don't mind that, since 10.5 is at 125. putting down a couple of extra bucks just to get that extra rush attempt just makes me feel a little bit better about taking the over. But in his 15 games, Montgomery's had 11 or more rush attempts 11 times, including 10 wins and 1 close loss. And that's the game script. I don't think any of us believe that the Commanders are going to win by double digits at Detroit. I think this is a Lions win. Sorry, I don't mean to spoil the side that you're going to ask me, EC, but I think that's where everybody's going to lean, is that the Lions will win the game. On the 4 occasions Montgomery didn't get 11 or more carries, he was either hurt, involved in a blowout loss in 3 of those 4. So the situation that we're really not hoping for, which is he gets hurt or that the Lions get blown out, that's when he didn't come through with those 11 plus carries. And the line suggests another blowout for Detroit. The stats say, and Prop talked about this, Commanders' run defense isn't as good. It's let up 4.5 yards per rush, a 12.9% 10-yard rush rate allowed over its past 5 games, including last week when they were pushed to the limit by Tampa Bay, while the Lions were resting their players, including their offensive line. There's a little concern about how effective Montgomery will be. Remember, he's coming back from a knee injury. But I think there's just as much, if not more, concern from the Lions coaching staff to take some of the work away from Jahmyr Gibbs. And again, Proper Rude talked about this. Jahmyr Gibbs has been awesome the last 3 weeks, but he was basically a one-man show. 23, 18, and 23 carries. We're not even talking about the catches. That's how many carries he had in those 3 games. That's not what he's used to. They can reduce that number and put a modest amount of rush attempts on Montgomery's plate. Plus, they like to use Montgomery in short yardage situations, including at the goal line. I'm sure you'll remember that when you talk about anytime touchdown bets. But for me, Montgomery over 10.5 rush attempts is my favorite prop from this game, even with the juice at minus 125.
All right, so I like what Kale's saying in the chat with Austin Eckler over 23.5 receiving yards. I can get behind that one.
I looked at that one. I wasn't bold enough to pull the trigger on that one because there's been a lot of games that Washington's lost. Brian Robinson's been healthy. Austin Eckler doesn't get over this mark. I didn't study just how good or bad the Lions are against running backs out of the backfield, but this is the team that plays the most man-to-man coverage, and that's usually something that doesn't work in favor of running backs catching passes out of the backfield.
Well, let's talk about a passing prop that I have, and that's Jaden Daniels over 1.5 touchdown passes at plus 105. This line you can find minus 110. Plus, I was surprised. So Jaden Daniels, excluding Week 18 when he only played the first quarter, he is over in 6 straight games when he's played the entirety of the game. The Lions, for the first 11.5 games, did not allow more than 1 touchdown pass in a game. And the reason I say half a game is because it was Thanksgiving against the Bears, and they were shutting out Caleb Williams. And then he threw 3 touchdowns in the second half, and then we all know how the game ended. But after that, to end the season, 4 of the last 6 games, the Lions gave up multiple touchdown passes to opposing quarterbacks in a game that I think is going to be a shootout based on what the lines makers say, and we'll talk about that in a second. Jaden Daniels at plus money to throw 2 touchdowns and keep this streak going makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Proppy.
Yeah, I like this quite a bit, EC. Obviously, great price point here considering it's plus money. And I think the game environment will definitely lend itself to being up-tempo, high-scoring. Obviously, no weather concerns playing at Ford Field. So, yeah, this is a one where you saw the Lions' defense down the stretch, as you mentioned, really implode. Again, if we shorten up till week 13, the Lions' pass defense was first in EPA in the NFL. They were the best pass defense in the league. But from week 14 to week 18, they absolutely fell off a cliff. They were, by the end of the season, ranked outside the top 10 in EPA allowed per dropback. No team had a bigger downturn over the course of the final 4 weeks of the season than that Detroit defense. So, yeah, I think this is a good time to attack them when they're vulnerable. Certainly Detroit's offense is going to be able to score. I think we all agree with that, basically be up-tempo. And it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Jaden Daniels, maybe he doesn't even have a touchdown pass in the first half, but in the second half, when they're trailing by 17 to 13 points, he starts to let it rip. And, I think this is a good spot considering the price point and the opponent and the matchup.
Nice to have you on my side. Last week was not as much, and my record was poor. So nice to have you on my side. All right, before we get into our thoughts on this game, 8.5 points. The Lions are favored with a total 55.5 points. I want to give you guys a couple of stats before you make picks. Washington only lost one game this season by more than 8 points, and that was in week 1 to Tampa Bay. 10 of their last 11 games have been decided by one possession, with the exception of that blowout win over Tennessee on December 1st. And by the way, of the 8 games Detroit has played against 2024-25 playoff teams, 6 of them were decided by one possession. So, Uncle Dave, with that said, what is your favorite pick, a spread or total in this game?
I like the Lions to win, and I like the Lions to cover. And this is one of those lines where I think they want everybody to put their money on the Commanders. It hasn't worked out that way. I believe something like 55% of the public money has gone on Washington. Usually they're looking for a higher percentage than that. And I could see why as easily as I could see Washington getting a chance to cover 9.5. I just think I'm more comfortable with Detroit coming off the bye, rested and ready to go.
Proppy, what do you say?
I'm with Dave here. I like Detroit as well. I just think Detroit's really built to take advantage of a team like Washington. Very little playoff experience. Jaden Daniels, as good as he's been, it's just hard for me to see, against an opponent like Detroit, if they're keeping him off of the field, they're running the football, down the Commanders' throats, which I think they're going to be able to do very effectively. I think they're going to dominate time and possession in this game. I think the Washington is going to be one-dimensional. I think they're going to have a hard time running the football against this Detroit defense. And, I just think Washington's been playing a little bit over their heads, above expectations. They're just running into, a very good, arguably the most efficient, or inarguably the most efficient offense in the NFL. And, I just think it's going to be hard for them to keep up.
I'll tell you what, those stats that I gave out, the Commanders they play a lot of exciting games, and the Lions, you talked about it with Kansas City, they don't blow good teams out. They're obviously they beat Minnesota in week 18, but then Minnesota looked to be a fraud from what we saw them on Monday night. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm going.
I will say
Washington.
what Detroit often does is they generate huge leads in the first half, and then in the second half, they start playing prevent or a shallow or a deep zone, and then they allow their opponents basically to run up a lot of yards and get a lot of points when the game's out of hand. So we'll see if that continues in the postseason. But Detroit's really they've been the most successful first half team in the NFL this year. And I expect them to come out and just run the ball very effectively against Washington.
Matt, I'm going with your Commanders not to win, but to keep it close. So let's bet them with the spread and hope these guys.
And shout out to Sia, a Commanders fan as well. Got to mention that, representing from the DMV.
There you go. Our guy Sia. How about Dave? I want to ask you about Andrew brings up Jameson Williams in the chat, 55.5. To me, he's a guy for certain promotions where there's longest touchdown. I think he's a guy I would take a long look at on a deep ball. Do you like that number for Jameson Williams?
I don't hate it. I do think that he's just become more and more involved he's more of a regular part of that offense. I would look at the receptions prop. If you can get anything over 4.5, I would take that in a heartbeat. But I also think, as Alex said, like we're talking about a team that could run the ball a lot more than normal. I was honestly looking at unders for Jared Goff. I debated, did I want to take the under on Goff's completions or the over on David Montgomery's rush attempts? And I even though the juice was higher on Montgomery, I went with Montgomery because we've seen a bunch of games this year. Like Jared Goff could go. The Commanders' defense doesn't scare me at all. He could go 24 of 29 passing, and the Goff under is a loser. And Montgomery can still get 11 plus carries because they're not throwing the ball that much. So I looked into it. I would probably look more at a receptions line for Jameson Williams rather than a yardage line, but I don't hate the yardage number. I don't think it's that out of whack.
And also don't forget that the Commanders have been playing really good pass defense. My Baker Mayfield prop did not go so well. You talked about that last week, Proppy, and that was a tough beat for me. I want to get to your Eagles against the Rams. And I saw the Rams in person on Monday night. very impressive out here in Arizona against the whatever the Vikings were. Sorry if you're a Vikings fan, that was painful. Probably, I don't think your Eagles looked terribly amazing against my Packers the other day. Green Bay just shot themselves in the foot and then got injuries and didn't. Jordan Love didn't have anyone to throw the ball to. But one player who had a really massive play was Dallas Goedert. And you and I separately, we didn't talk before the show. We both like Dallas Goedert, and we're both playing the same prop. But I'm going to let you take it. Go ahead, tell us why you're playing Goedert.
Yeah, it's always good when we organically land on the same exact prop, same side here. We both like Dallas Goedert to go over 36.5 receiving yards. That play where he caught that pass and then stiff-armed cornerback Carrington Valentine on his way towards the end zone was a very impressive play. Dallas Goedert, spent portions of the season banged up, but looked fully healthy and explosive to me. So I like this spot quite a bit for him, really kind of serving as that safety valve for Jalen Hurts. The Eagles, not just against the Packers, they've struggled throwing the football down the field recently. And I think that might be the case again against the Rams here. So I anticipate Goedert really kind of serving as, again, that safety valve for Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown is not fully healthy. And when you don't have an A.J. Brown fully healthy, that really takes away from their ability to attack down the field here. This Rams defense has also made massive strides. 4 consecutive opponents. If you throw out the Seattle game in Week 18, where the majority of their starters didn't play, they have held their last 4 opponents to under double-digit points, 10 points or fewer, 4 straight games. So this defense has made some massive strides here. Also, they are a massive tight end funnel all season long. I believe they gave up the 3rd most targets, 3rd most receptions, and 4th most yards to opposing tight ends this season. So it's an excellent matchup. I don't think the Eagles are going to have a lot of success attacking them down the field. I think Dallas Goedert looked healthy. He has 100% route participation as well. He is literally on the field for every single Jalen Hurts drop back, which you love to see as well. 36.5 yards, very low. I also like his 3.5 reception line, but I love Dallas Goedert in this spot and what is a fantastic matchup.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with you as well. I mean, it's very rare that we have the same prop on the show. We usually try to avoid it, but it just was what it was. I mean, there are 13 tight ends that are over this number against the Rams this season, including TJ Hawkinson on Monday night, who I bet, and it was nice to see him get over on that touchdown pass that he got from Sam Darnold, the one good play the Vikings had on Monday night. Goddard didn't practice with an illness on Thursday. I'm not worried about it. He still had against the Rams in Week 12, only 4 catches, 19 yards, but still had over a 25% target share in that game. So as for everything Proppy said and more, I am going with Dallas Goedert over 36.5 yards. Dave, I want to ask you about this one. Actually, I'll give this one to you, Proppy. Jeff says he's going to empty the clip, he says, on Devonte Smith over 65 yards receiving at plus 145. I don't know about empty the clip. What's your take on that?
This Eagles pass offense is struggling right now. They also run the football as much as any team in the league. So I just don't know how much passing volume there's going to be. And then with A.J. Brown, despite him not being 100% healthy, he just is a game breaker, and he has the ability to basically show up and be a target hog basically anytime he steps on the field. So just a combination of a lack of confidence in the Eagles' ability to throw the ball in the middle portions, intermediate and deep parts of the field, coupled with just minimal passing volume. We see Jalen Hurts attempts line 25, 26.5. These are incredibly low numbers. So we know the Eagles are going to run the ball as much as they possibly can. We're just dealing with minimal passing volume, and the Eagles' passing game just does not look like it's firing on all cylinders right now. So it's a stay away from me as far as I'm concerned.
There's another issue to play. Yeah, go ahead. And I don't know if you guys talked about it, but weather could be a factor there. I would hate to make that bet on Devonte Smith and find out that it's coming down in massive clumps of snow for the game. The forecast does call for snow, but it says only 1 to 3 inches. If it's 1 to 3 inches, I would assume that visibility will be okay. Usually snow is a good thing for offenses. It's not a good thing for defenses, but it's visibility that's a concern, along with the cold temperature. That's obviously going to be a concern. I do not like the idea of emptying the clip into Devonte Smith getting 66 plus yards. But that being said, it is your money, and it is possible that he could do such a thing, particularly against the Rams.
So, Uncle Dave, Matthew Stafford is 1-8 career in rain or snow games. So you would think that he's going to not pass as much, and that would mean more Kyon Williams running on the ground, right?
No, I think he is going to have to throw more in this game. And again, this is another bet. In fact, every prop for Philadelphia, I know we talked about getting it in early. Maybe if you want to put like a couple of sprinkles in early and then wait and see how the game looks, look at it, look at the stadium an hour before kickoff to get an idea of just what the weather will be like for the game between the Rams and the Eagles. I like the under on rush attempts for Kyon Williams, and it's 18.5. It's a big number, but I found it at plus money, plus 102. So probably a low juice bet for you to take. He's had 18 or fewer rushes in 8 games this year, including 4 Rams losses, 3 one-score wins. If the Rams are going to win, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I expect Philadelphia to win. I think Proppy will feel the same way on that one. The Eagles defense have seen just 4 running backs get 19 or more rushes against them this year. And remember, Philadelphia's run defense, we've talked about a lot of great run defenses on this show. 3.5 yards per rush and a slim 4% rate of 10 or more yards allowed on a carry to running backs in their past 5 games. That is excellent. This is not a good matchup for Kyon Williams, even with Nakobe Dean sidelined and Oren Burks expected to come in his place. I still think it's going to be a difficult day of sledding, pun intended, for Kyon Williams. And I also expect Philadelphia to run the ball much more effectively. They'll win the time of possession. And if they can build any kind of a lead on the Rams, as long as it's not like totally coming down, like a massive snowstorm, a blizzard of epic proportions, Stafford's going to throw. And it might not go well for Stafford, but it means that Kyon Williams is not going to be able to get a ton of carries in the game. So I'm anticipating that game script is going to be in Philadelphia's favor and that Kyon Williams will get used a lot, but not get 19 plus carries in the game.
All right, let's make unofficial leans and totals. We're giving you bonus content on the prop show this week. The line is 6 for Philadelphia, and the over-under is 43.5. Proppy, what do you got for your team?
I also do want to offer regarding Kyon Williams under, as we played that last week. I was actually somewhat surprised by how aggressive the Rams were passing the football in the first half. I think Kyon Williams only had 6 or 7 carries. So, I agree with Dave. If weather isn't a massive factor, I do anticipate the Rams leaning more towards passing, and that's even in a neutral game environment, which bodes really well for the under for Dave's prop here. As far as the game is concerned, and my take here, it's a lot of points, frankly, for a team that's struggling, that's been somewhat one-dimensional. That being said, their one dimension running the football is incredibly effective. But this Rams defense has really impressed me. I think this game is going to be low scoring. We have a 43-point total. I think it's a lot of points when we look at such a low scoring game here. So while I do expect the Eagles to win, I don't know if they're going to win by 7 or 6.5 points. So I will actually take the Rams in the points here.
Okay, Uncle Dave.
Philadelphia's last 3 wins against Pittsburgh, Dallas, and the Giants, and they obviously didn't play their starters against the Giants, all by 7 points. How'd they do against Green Bay? They look pretty good. They won by 12 points in that game. So they're covering a touchdown now in 4 of their past 5. I am taking Proppydelphia.
I am taking the under in this game, and I liked it even before the snow. It's down to 43.5. The Rams defense over the last 4 games, let's exclude week 18, they've given up a combined 33 total points. When they played their starters, they rested him against Seattle in week 18. Pretty darn good. They're going to keep Philadelphia in check for a while, but I'll tell you what, I think Philadelphia's defense is the best in the league for a reason. Under, just like the national championship game on Monday night. Under. That's what we're playing. Go ahead, Proppy.
I know Dave will know the answer to this, but do we remember what Saquon did the last time that he faced the Rams?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was over 300 total yards of offense.
Yes.
302. That's correct. Yes. 255 and 47.
On the ground. Yes.
He's not going to do that again.
You're going to take the under on 300?
Even if he goes for 150, that's still his line is 111 and a half yards. Again, I've talked about this with Saquon. I can't fade him. I want to out of sheer principle. But this Eagles offense coupled with Saquon right now, I cannot fade him even against the Rams defense that's playing well. This Rams defense, as good as they are, and I've talked about it at length, they're light up front. And we saw that when these teams first hooked up. So as much as they've improved, it's going to be hard to stop Saquon against this Eagles offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, he's not getting 302 total yards, but 150 is in play. I agree with you, Proppy. Betting unders for Saquon Barkley, not really the proposition that I want to make. But, we can play Saquon Barkley for a first touchdown. And don't worry, if he doesn't get it but gets the second, we still make our money back. And I'll tell you how. At BetMGM, when we've all had our first touchdown bet called back before, BetMGM has given you a second chance. BetMGM's Pro Football Second Chance, plus any first touchdown score bet. And if your player doesn't score first but scores second, get your entire stake back in cash. No opt-in required. Here's how it works. Place a pregame straight first touchdown score bet in any NFL game. If your player scores the first touchdown in the game, great. You win your wager as normal. If your player scores the second touchdown in the game, you'll get your stake back in cash. It's that simple. Log in to BetMGM for more details. Coming up next, Ravens, Bills on CBS. Who we got? We'll find out after we hear from one of our sponsors. So Monday night, I'm at the Rams and Vikings game, and I send a picture to my two guys on screen with me here, and I say, hey, here's where I am. And Proppy goes, oh, those are great seats. And Uncle Dave says, so what kicker props do you have? I mean, Hef, in the chat, did you think I was not going to do a kicker prop on this show? Now, I'll be honest. We don't have a lot. We don't have any other props in this Bills-Ravens game, so we're going to talk about it more at length, and we'll get to one of the questions that was asked earlier. But first, I'm going to give out my prop here, and that is the first time all season, just for you, Uncle Dave, I'm playing an under. I'm playing Justin Tucker under 1.5 field goals, and I know you're gonna hate me. Look at that minus 155. I don't like it, but it's an under, and so Proppy, I know his mind is blown here. Let me explain why. Excluding Week 18 when they were playing backups, the Bills have allowed 0 or 1 opponent field goals in 7 straight games. And oh, by the way, Justin Tucker only has multiple field goals in 2 of his last 9 games. Plus with potential snow, not going to be really windy, but this is going to be a game where touchdowns decide it. There are going to be points in this one. I just don't think they're going to come from field goals. I think we're going to see a lot of touchdowns. And by the way, when Justin Tucker faced these guys earlier in the season, he did not have any field goals. Go ahead, Proppy.
Minimal thoughts here, but just thank you, Lord, for not taking a price on an over at least. At least this is an under. So that's all I have to say. At least you're not taking an over at this price, you see.
I will never take another kicker prop on the shows that we do of more than minus 130 after the Chase McLaughlin bet from midseason that Dave said, I don't recommend it. And it did not hit. They scored 50 points, and it still didn't hit. And so from then on, the Dave Richard rule was born. I also want to add another addendum to the Dave Richard rule. When you are at a football game, an NFL football game, going forward, you must bet a kicker prop. I did not do this on Monday night. Every NFL game that I go to for the rest of my life, as long as I don't check into Gamblers Anonymous beforehand, I will bet a kicker prop because of you, Uncle Dave.
Okay, well, the second rule is ridiculous. And the first rule, listen, I don't think it's a good idea even to take an under at minus 155. I think minus 155 needs to be reserved for the surest of sure things. And while, yes, the track record suggests that Buffalo doesn't give up a lot of field goals and that Justin Tucker's rarely had these opportunities. You're still betting against Justin Tucker. And that's just something at minus 155, no less. If it were even money, okay, I think I'd get it. But I don't know. Just feels like
I didn't want to do it.
They're just
then why did you, EC?
Clown suit on this one, EC.
Yeah, I have to say I'm with Dave here. Paying this price to fade Justin Tucker, just
be glad I didn't do 1.5 units on that, like I did earlier in the season. That was a lesson learned. All right, I want to get to
I'll give you a showdown at minus 150.
I will not take your showdown at minus 150. I already paid you $100 last week, but go Bills to hold Justin Tucker to 0 or 1 field goals. Mike asked a question in the chat earlier in the show, and I want to talk about it. Derrick Henry, he likes, first of all, his over 19.5 for his longest rush and an over under 19.5 rushing attempts. So let me give a stat for this. Last week I gave the over. Derrick Henry, when he's had 20 rushing attempts, the Ravens are 9-0, and he's rushed for 100 yards every time. So, Proppy, I'm going to start with you. Which way are you leaning on both of these props?
It's tough because we're talking about Derrick Henry, who, besides Saquon Barkley, has been as good as any offensive player in the NFL this year. That being said, the reason that I don't have props, and I'm curious to hear why Dave doesn't as well, from this football game is we saw these teams play earlier this season, and I personally believe you can throw that game out the window. This game is in Buffalo now. Buffalo has been arguably the best home team in the NFL this season. Undefeated at home. Their average margin of victory, I think, is something like 15 or 16 points as well. And they certainly have a lot of pride, and they certainly remember what Derrick Henry did to them as well. So I expect Derrick Henry to meet a lot more force than he met back when these teams hooked up earlier in the season. I have a tough time basically soft capping this game. I don't really have a good feel for how I think it's going to go. That being said, I don't have any real strong conviction on individual player props as a result of that. So it's hard for me to basically give an answer with conviction in either direction. But if you gun to my head, I'm going under on both.
All right, Dave, you didn't play anything here either. Why?
Okay, well, first of all, the Bills have only allowed 10 runs of 20-plus yards all season, only one since week 11. So that concerns me. That being said, I never want to bet against Derrick Henry, and all it takes is him stiff-arming one dude, and he's off for 20 yards at a minimum. Henry does have a run against them for 25 yards, and obviously the 87-yard touchdown against Buffalo back in week number 4. So I get where Mike is coming from. I chose not to bet this game because the weather really wasn't that big of a factor. I want to enjoy this one. I think this is going to be the most exciting game we see all year, including the Super Bowl. I love that we've got 2 of the top MVP candidates facing each other. I think both defenses are moving in the right direction. I really don't even feel good about who I'm taking to win the game. I just want to enjoy it. And so if you're just the kind of guy that loves enjoying football and you don't need to have action on it, we gave you plenty to take that we really loved on the other 3 games. There is so much that can go sideways here with 2 dominant teams with 2 rising defenses that I honestly, I'm kind of just staying away, and I'm going to kick back on my couch. I'm going to open a nice ice cold Diet Coke, and I'm going to enjoy the game without having a sweat. And then you never know how the live lines might change or how the game might flow. And then betting it live, that's a different story. But going into the game, I'm taking a hands-off approach to enjoy it.
You also have a gentleman appearing in this football game whose physique was clowned on after riding in an elevator with Uncle Dave in the offseason. A gentleman that I said had one of my favorite season-long player props that he easily cleared, by the way. Also, I think he appeared in almost every game. So for having a physique that Dave opined was, not impressive.
He was startlingly thin.
He was startlingly thin, right? Yeah, he looked more like a distance runner, I think Dave said, than an NFL player. And he certainly showed that he can be an elite fantasy back and an RB1 and definitely handled a massive workload and was the best player in that offense, sans the MVP, Josh Allen. So
you know what's interesting?
Cap to myself and to Senor Cook as well for the fantastic season and cashing those season-long props. That was one of my biggest positions as well as far as the season-long market was concerned.
Seriously, that was gutsy of you because the track record of running backs in Buffalo had not been good in the Josh Allen era, but James Cook proved that, like an elevator, he could rise to the occasion, and he did it quite often. He did it without having a game. I don't think he had a game where he played 70% of the snaps all season. So
incredibly
really
efficient
anomaly at the running back spot. I bow down to thee, James Cook. Hope to see you in an elevator again soon, so I could formally apologize.
You know, Joe in the chat says, I tune in for the picks, but I stay for Dave's multiple proppy monikers. Propadelphia was the most recent. I agree, Joe, 100%. He also asks, Justice Hill over 25 yards receiving at even money. Thoughts?
I don't mind that one. I think he's going to be utilized, without Zay Flowers on the field. And yeah, he's actually for a running back, because I typically avoid running back receiving props as I think they're very high variance in nature. He gets a healthy amount of targets, and he's the first look on a significant amount of targets for a running back. So this is one I don't mind at all.
There have been games here, where Justice Hill has outsnapped Derrick Henry. And it's any time the Ravens find themselves in a competitive game or when they're trailing in a game, when we will see more Justice Hill in the second half. I actually like that line a lot.
Interesting. And there you go. An extra. It pays to watch live. Thank you for that one, Joe. All right, let's make a pick on this game. Ravens are 1.5-point road favorites with the total at 51.5. Proppy, which way you lean?
I like Dave and just excited for this game. I think the winner of this game could easily win the Super Bowl here. I think both these teams right now are peaking, led by the two MVP candidates. All credit to Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen is going to win his first MVP, deservedly so. Without a 1,000-yard receiver and James Cook, who just barely, I think, in Week 17 or Week 18, eclipsed 1,000 yards rushing. The Bills averaged 3 points per drive. That is top 5 in NFL history. I'm talking about efficiency that was off the charts, that rivaled the Patriots with Tom Brady and Randy Moss and Wes Welker. So this team has been absolutely incredible. And if you look at the supporting cast on paper, just all the more impressive. So I got to go with the home team. I think they get their revenge against an excellent Ravens team. I think they get the win here at home.
Dave.
I'm going to say that coaching makes a difference in the playoffs, and certainly it does here as well. And Sean McDermott has had his fair share of oopsies when it comes to the playoffs. And John Harbaugh, let's be real. Look at what the Ravens did in their playoff loss last year offensively. They went completely away from their identity last year, and they ended up losing. I think that they've rectified that mistake. I think their defense has been playing very well for a long time, and I think they can get to Josh Allen without blitzing. And that's basically what they've been doing all year anyway. And the run defense is awesome. Sorry, James Cook. I'm going to say that even though both teams have a Superman, Baltimore goes into Buffalo and finds a way to win because of coaching, because of defense, and because of kicking. Kicking, of course, it's so important. They've got Justin Tucker, you see.
Go ahead, Proppy. Oh, Proppy, you're on mute there. You're on mute. Yeah, hold on. There we go.
Defense was a turnstile all season long for Baltimore as well. Made some significant strides and improvements there too. So I do want to mention that because they were a target as far as identifying overs for wide receivers early in the year. But yeah, the pass defense has significantly improved recently.
When Gardner beat them up in week 2, I think the Ravens knew that they needed to make some changes in their secondary.
Baltimore has 5 straight wins of more than 14 or more points. I think the game's going to be close, but I picked Baltimore and Philly at the start of the season to make the Super Bowl. I'm sitting on a big future ticket. Let's hit it. All right, let's get on to the recap screen here. Uncle Dave is on Patrick Mahomes over 23.5 rushing yards. Joe Mixon under 15.5 rushing attempts at even money. David Montgomery over 10.5 rushing attempts minus 125. Kyon Williams under 18.5 rushing attempts at plus 102. Proppy is also on David Montgomery, but this time over 46.5 rushing yards at minus 110. Travis Kelce over 52.5 receiving yards minus 110. And Dallas Goedert over 36.5 receiving yards at minus 115. I am on Jaden Daniels over 1.5 touchdown passes at plus 105. Joe Mixon under 57.5 rushing yards at minus 110. Like Proppy, Dallas Goedert over 36.5 receiving yards at minus 115. And finally, Justin Tucker under 1.5 field goals at a juicy minus 155. All right, Uncle Dave, what is your favorite play of the three that Proppy gave out?
Well, I was going to say just my favorite prop of all. It's probably going to be the Jaden Daniels one because it's plus money for him to get 2 touchdowns. His favorite, the prop that he liked that I liked is the Montgomery one, obviously.
Okay, fair enough. Proppy, outside of Montgomery, what's your favorite of Uncle Dave's?
Kyon Williams under his rushing attempts. Again, great price point, as Dave mentioned and found. And I would agree here. Significant splits and wins versus losses if you look at his rush attempts. So I do expect the Eagles to prevail, and I expect the Eagles to also keep the Rams offense off of the field, thus limiting his attempts.
All right, Uncle Dave, you're going to get the last word here. Kevin Charles in the chat asks Jared Goff over under 270.5 passing yards.
Yeah, just because I was thinking about taking the under on his completions. I think about the running backs being healthy for Detroit. It has nothing to do with the matchup. I'm not worried about the Commanders' pass rush irritating Jared Goff. I would take the under on it. I don't think he has to do as much as we have seen over the past month, 2 months, majority of the year, however you want to call it, for Goff to carry the Lions to victory. I think this is one where the run game does it.
I like the under too.
There it is. All right. Well, they're on it. Kevin, don't go over. Go under. Listen to the guys. What a great show we've had. Thanks to Claire behind the scenes for producing. Did a great job. Once again, for Uncle Dave and Proppy, I am EC. And as I always like to say, let's hit it big. Good luck.